Of course, the big story of the week, in fact, I would say, is the selection, or the interviews rather, for who's going to be the next Chief Justice of this Republic. Today, Gauteng Judge President Dunstan Mlambo is being interviewed, and he says he laments the loss of public confidence in the judicial system. Judges coming under attack, courts being used for corruption gains. These are just some of the concerns raised by the third Chief Justice candidate who is in the so-called hot seat today. Justice Mlambo believes he has what it takes to strengthen the independence of the judiciary. Currently, they've broken for lunch. They'll be back at about 10 to 3. Meanwhile, let's go live to Sentin, the venue of the interviews, and join my colleague, reporter Heidi Giokos, who's been following the JSE interviews since they began. She's joining us now from there. Heidi, good afternoon. Dunstan Mlambo grilled on the kind of cases the Gauteng division takes on, and there's a perception he's in favor of the country's current political administration.
Yes, certainly, Bradan. I do think that many were expecting this interview of Judge President of the Gauteng Division, Dunstan Mlambo, to be a little more heated compared to the other two candidates. But we are joined by researcher at CASEC, Dan Mafora. Thank you so much for your time, Dan. We do appreciate it. A lot has been said, a lot has been asked. But Bradan in studio has just mentioned a very important point, that when the question was raised as to there seems to be some kind of perception that Judge President Mlambo is in favor of the current administration, and there seems to be a lot of cases referred to the Gauteng division. What do you think with that kind of perception and view of the courts, but also the response of Judge President Dunstan Mlambo?
So it was a very interesting question, and especially, coming from someone like Advocate Madoza Sela, who is a representative of the bar here. Or is a practicing lawyer himself, rather. And it certainly, I think, it was answered well, to say that it perhaps isn't a fair generalization to make, to say that all the cases that go to the Pretoria High Court come out in favor of President Ramaphosa. But I do think that, these are the kinds of talking points that are out in the media, and the Judge President did well to kind of try and allay those fears. But of course, the one answer that I thought he would have given was that the Pretoria High Court has jurisdiction over the government, or over most government departments, and that's why all of these cases go there, which I thought was probably an easier way to answer the question. But all in all, I think did answer it quite well, citing also a few examples of cases that, or at least against the previous administration, that were in their favor, right? Because the idea is that he ruled mostly against, or his court ruled mostly against former President Zuma, but is doing the opposite for President Ramaphosa. So that was a very interesting question.
Yes, and I think also the fact that he made it very clear that he doesn't have a soft spot for President Cyril Ramaphosa, but he also has nothing against former President Jacob Zuma. I want us to go over to the rumour, that's what we'll call it for now, because there's been no official complaints or evidence brought forward of sexual harassment. He seemed quite taken aback by that question, and he said that it's mostly been brought up to poison his interview, and he says that there is no evidence so far to suggest that, and he made it very clear that he has not sexually harassed anybody.
So that was quite a surprising feature of today's interview. We certainly didn't know about these allegations beforehand, and it doesn't seem like the JSE put it to him either. And I think the Commission spokesperson, Advocate Dalimpofu, did say that this was not an issue that was put before him as a possible objection or a complaint. And he did say, it was unfortunate that a rumor such as this, where there actually hasn't been a formal complaint or someone coming out to say that, I was a victim or I know of this, is concerning, that it has now found its way into the official, records of the JSE, and is probably going to dominate the rest of this interview.
Just lastly, Dan, we are running out of time, but I quickly have to ask you this question around Commissioner Mlambo asking him about how he has white judges on his bench to write judgments because they are better writers. Also questioning the amount of white judges that are in the Gauteng division. But Dunstan and Mlambo making it very clear that he's been for transformation, and when he arrived at the Gauteng division there were only 15 female judges, and now there are over 38 female judges.
Yeah, I thought that was an unfortunate question. We know Judge Mlambo has been a judge for quite a long time, is an esteemed judge, respected by both his colleagues and the rest of the profession. But I did think that he handled that quite well, to say, well, in the 20 plus years that I've been a judge, I was writing these judgments and I hadn't been questioned on whether or not I actually wrote them. And the insinuation that white judges were writing for him is quite insulting to him just as a person, but also is quite unfortunate when it is like hurled at a black judge and who is someone who's very respected. But I do think that race will always be an issue here at the JSE, especially just given how all of these perceptions about who the courts are ruling for, it will keep coming up. But I think that he was very clear that he allocates cases randomly and that it isn't calculated at anything more. Yeah,
certainly. Thank you so much for your time and your insights. We do appreciate it. We'll definitely be engaging with you later on as well as tomorrow, Bradan. I think just some important insights there with regards to some of the questions and answers raised here, especially for Judge President Dunstan Mlambo, of course, handling it very well, as some of the questions have been very direct and almost somewhat personal and political.
Heidi, you've been expecting this question. I've been asking it of you since the beginning of the findings. We are now almost like halfway, so to speak. We have done 2 judges. We've got Justice Mlambo today, and tomorrow, of course, the Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo. The mood and the sentiment, especially with that direct line of questioning, which you say was a little bit personal. What's the sentiment in that room today?
Bradan, when JP and Mlambo walked in, I think you could feel the presence in the room. You could almost start seeing the tension building up because we all expected very difficult questions, political questions to be raised, given the kind of court cases and applications that have been referred to the Gauteng division, and given the fact that Dunstan Mlambo is the Judge President of the Gauteng division. The mood has definitely changed. I think the ante is definitely up compared to what we've seen in the last 2 days. But as I mentioned yesterday, it's got a lot to do with the candidates and how they come across and how they answer the questions. He's been very straightforward, he's been very precise and very clear in his answers. He's also made it very clear with certain questions raised, such with sexual harassment, that he will not accept that because he did not sexually harass anybody. So definitely different, and it's expected rather, because they're all different candidates. They all have different personalities. But I must say there's a lot more tension in the room, and we're expecting that even after lunch because of the kinds of questions we are expecting to be posed to JP Mlambo.
Yeah, there was a little bit of recognition there at some point coming from one of the commissioners, that the fact that he already had a BProc degree, but when he was already sitting as a judge, he went back to school and did his LLB at that age. You're never too old, I guess, to study and educate yourself. We'll have to wait and see, Heidi, how the rest of the afternoon plays out. Thank you very much for that update and touching base there with Dan Mafura, one of KSEC's officials, of course, who've been watching this process also very closely.